Greetings to all, and welcome back to another video of my Satisfactory playthrough. I'm showcasing the upper floor of my starter base today. My beginning base was set up with iron plates, rods, screws, and other items, just like everyone else's playthrough, and it was in an open area. I've now constructed a starter base, filled it to the brim with my machines, and am producing everything up to tier 8 in this area. I'm currently concentrating on building a new base with appropriate designs and aesthetics to make everything appear nice. That is, however, a different video. I will link to all of the videos I have released thus far and showcase what I am producing at my top level in this video. I believe everyone knows where I am. This is in the grasslands, on the map's lower left. This, in my opinion, is the ideal starting point in grasslands, with plenty of resources and open space up to tiers 5 and 6. I began my setup near the map's corner, resulting in a tiny setup before expanding farther. As you can see, we have 2 iron nodes on top of the hill, and this is where I had my initial resource automated. They were iron plates, rods, screws, and reinforced iron plates. And another 2 iron nodes, where I began manufacturing more sophisticated goods in addition to the ones I am producing at the top. I have yet to delete the previous one, but I will do so shortly. So, in addition to the 2 iron nodes at the top and bottom of the tiny hill, there is a lime node near the first 2. Along with this, we have a copper node that is relatively close to them. I had a modest copper setup, which I have removed now. Behind the base, there is also a pure coal node and a regular sulfur node. As a result, this location is best suited for items up to tier 5 and 6. I was unaware at the time that I had turned off the power to my radio tower, which is why I couldn't see the nodes on my map. Now, let's go with my starting base. I was in the middle of my setup here, and after completing the tier 4 setup, I intended to construct a mega base. This is because I was already going to move to tier 3 and 4 belts and felt that now was the time to begin, as most of the nodes nearby were normal nodes and tier 4 belts were more than adequate, and my first setup was encased industrial beams. The lowest floor you see here is my storage facility, and that belt is my primary belt that takes all of the resources and smartly divides them into storage bins using smart splitters. I presently have 38 different resources in this facility and will shortly have 40. These structures are where I bring all of the resources from different sections of the map into this one mega base from all 4 corners. I'm also taking in water from a little water hole behind my base, where you can place a lot of water extractors for your initial base if you don't mind looking ugly. Because this is my initial base and I didn't have many resources, I just started building my base like a giant box with no design. This location also contains 3 standard lime nodes beneath my base, where I began generating a massive amount of concrete for the base. I am focusing only on the top floor today, as it's open and easy to show you guys. I decided to increase the size of my top floor because I wanted to create a certain number of objects on this floor before possibly moving to a new base. I still have 2 additional sets planned for this top floor. Fused modular frames and turbo motors are what they are. I recently finished my supercomputer setup, which is a modest one that I will show you at the end of my video. I opted to build a tiny setup to make silica using the raw quartz because I am utilizing it to design my factory and it is easily available on this level for future use. I have long removed it as I had enough. This is my belt area, where I bring all of my resources and use them as input to my various settings on my floor. When I decide to cover my top floor, I will entirely block my belt area, which will be visible from the outside but not visible when I am within my factory. At the same time, I have made sure not have that many clippings. This is my first blueprint in this save and the setup for 18 computers every minute. This was not done by me, but rather by Yaquez. I stumbled across his channel when looking for blueprints and decided to watch how he did it so that I could start constructing my own. Check out his channel, where he exhibits all of the blueprints and gives them away for free. This configuration provides 18 computers and 48 circuit boards, or 18 crystal oscillators and 48 circuit boards that may be switched between using a power switch. I'm making crystal oscillators right now because I've already filled my storage bins with computers and have enough for my setup. I'm only using the computer for another setup here. I really liked his design and the aesthetics of the blueprint here, so I decided to make it identical to all future blueprints I made. Now, onto my second setup here, which is 50 circuit boards per minute. After reviewing Yake's blueprint, I decided to attempt something new and decided to create circuit boards, as these were required for my next step. This is relatively easy to make, but it was my first on my own and I was really happy with what I came up with. I have switched off the setup, as the first setup is already making 48 per minute and I stopped using this in my future setup. I just realized that since I turned off my setup here, the radio tower to which this setup was connected has also turned off. So I'm transferring it and turning it on. I'll eventually relocate it or install it on top of this level once I've enclosed it. Just checking it is switched on properly. Now, I am able to see all the resources near my starting base which I was not able to see before, including all the limestone, coal, and sulfur. As you can see, I made the front of my blueprints look like Yake's, which I loved because it was simple but effective. I decided to include some color beams here, but I decided not to include them in future layouts because I didn't like them. This is my setup of 50 circuit boards per minute. Next to my circuit boards, I have my heavy modular frame setup. This blueprint is another one I created, and it has a two-story layout. I've shown all of the blueprints in previous videos, but not this one since I'm bringing in already built modular frames and steel ingots needed for this setup because I had extra. Most of the blueprints I've created begin with raw resources, and I'll examine this one to see if I can create it entirely from raw resources. To make it similar on this floor, I designed the design identical to the ones I showed you previously. As you can see, a single blueprint is making 2.813 heavy modular frames running at 100% capacity. So in total 11.2 per minute. I know why, but at the same time, the concrete floors are flicking and making it look bad. But anyway, I will moving out of this floor soon, so I will see what I can do about it. This is my third setup on this floor making 11.2 heavy modular frames per minute. Now onto my setup of 2 adaptive control unit per minute. This comprises circuit boards from my second setup, heavy modular frames from my third setup, automatic wiring from the basement floor that I constructed ahead of time and just pulled here as one of the inputs, and computers from my first setup. Since I am not using this adaptive control unit, I switched this off and changed the first setup from making computers to crystal oscillators. Once again, this is just a small blueprint, which just takes these 4 resources as inputs and makes 1 adaptive control unit per blueprint. In total, this setup makes 2. As you can see, the power is off since I just finished sending these to the elevator, which was essential for going to tiers 7 and 8. This is also utilized for other elevator sections, however it is now turned off. Now, I am going to my elevated part to show my other parts of this floor. The adaptive control unit finishes there, as does the heavy modular frame, and I ended up with enough additional space to finish another setup. Since the elevator component signals the conclusion of the previous phase, and I am now shifting to aluminium resources, my first aim is to create a Mark V belt that will be useful for my setup and allow me to make better use of pure nodes. I'm bringing in 780 bauxite from a pure node in a different biome for this, the very first aluminum build. I had to use a long bus because I hadn't yet switched to trains and didn't want to include trains in this initial starting base. It took some time to bring them, but now I have a bus route planned for the future. I have 2 stages to my first setup of aluminium things I am producing here. One is alclad aluminium sheets and the other is aluminium casings. And the location I am pointing to now is the start of my setup for alclad aluminium sheets. I am currently making 720 in this setup. I will leave a link on the right-hand side of the screen if you want to check it out. There were a lot of refineries, constructors, smelters, and assemblers in this setup. What you're seeing now are the assemblers. Finally, I am pleased with how this arrangement appears, as it is methodical rather than haphazard, as I was doing on my initial playthrough. I stored enough alclad aluminium sheets in my storage after building this that I still have 12 containers worth of it. And that adds up to a lot, so I'm sending the rest to the resource sink to sink everything extra. After storing and using them to change belts to Mark V, I then move to my next setup. The constructors you see there are building aluminium casings. I've turned off the setup because I'm not utilizing it for anything else. This is due to the fact that I have yet to produce batteries and have no need for them. But I did keep 12 containers of casings because they are still utilized to build blenders, which are necessary for subsequent phases of my manufacturing. So far, I've utilized a power switch to toggle between alclad aluminum sheets and aluminum casing. This is because the items they both require are the same, and I can switch between them as needed. However, these sheets are now being used in another setup, therefore casing setup is turned off. Because these pure aluminium ingots are used by both casings and sheets, I designed the power poles such that the configurations are distinct and easily interchangeable. Now, onto heat sinks. The heatsink recipe calls for both alclad aluminium sheets and copper sheets. I already make alclad aluminium sheets, so I started my heatsink setup with those in mind. The setup you are seeing below me is for the heatsink. To manufacture enough copper ingot for this process, I'm bringing in a copper line and creating copper ingot using a pure copper recipe and copper sheets using a steamed copper sheet recipe. I'm also making copper sheets from the extra copper ingots from this setup, which are required by alclad aluminium sheets. This is the setup in its full glory. I am then sending these heat sinks to another setup in the same floor. The refineries you see behind the alclad aluminium sheets are my setup for producing the resources needed to create weapons. I'll also post a link to this setup on the right side of this video. In this setup, I'm creating colorless liquid, black powder, and turbo fuel. These are required for making a number of rifle ammo, rebar gun ammo and Nobelisk. Check out that video if you have some sulfur and impure oil node. You will be able to progress through MAM easily and have a steady input of these resources which I just mentioned for future use. This is the impure node, from which I deliver the oil to be processed here. In the future, I plan to construct a separate oil processing and power facility. Now my next setup is 65 high-speed connectors per minute. The configuration I'm demonstrating here is for high-speed connectors. I thought alclad aluminium sheet would take longer, but high-speed connectors took longer. But I could also do it quickly because of the experience I gained from producing aluminium sheets. For this, once again I brought resources from a very long distance via Mark V belts to this facility. This system begins with those refineries producing quick wire, then moves on to those producing copper ingots, copper sheets, circuit boards, and finally high-speed connectors. I'll leave a link to this video on the video's right side. When I look at it from the top, these two layouts look and are done in a cleaner manner. After finishing this open arrangement of high-speed connectors, I decided to try creating a blueprint for the same. It took some work, but I was eventually able to construct the high-speed connector from a single blueprint. I'll provide a link to the video where I display the blueprint, and I've also attached it for free in the description. For a moment, I thought I didn't have enough resources to show you guys here, but I did, so here you go. As you can see, I have made the design similar to all other blueprints on this floor. This blueprint is making 2 high-speed connectors per minute. In the future, I will try to tweak this and make it 3 high-speed connectors. So, if I had utilized this blueprint before constructing this setup, I would have needed at least 30 blueprints linked up together to make the 60 I needed for the radio control unit that I am making next to it. However, I will utilize this blueprint in the future if I require high-speed connectors for other pieces that is needed to complete Satisfactory. The blueprint that you are seeing in the distance is for the radio control unit. I am currently making 30 per minute. I'm following the alternate recipe because I am making them next to it and easily available on the same floor. I'm now using the heat sinks and high-speed connectors I made to construct radio control units. I also prepared a blueprint for them, however, as you can see, since heat sinks and high-speed connectors are already made outside, the blueprint itself is a small unit, where I am manufacturing quartz crystals needed for the radio control unit and the radio control unit itself using refinery and manufacturer respectively. I have set up a total of 8 blueprints, making a total of 30 radio control units. I have now stored 12 containers worth of radio control units in my storage and have been keeping them ready for the stuff which needs them. Now let's go to my next setup where I am making cooling systems, and this is how my top floor looks when we look at it from above. I have also made sure to minimize clippings, but to me a small amount is always fine. The setup you are seeing before me is for the 30 cooling systems I am producing now. I will leave a link to my video showcasing the same. I'm using the standard recipe because I require petroleum coke for a steel factory that I intend to build soon. And this arrangement has a surplus of it creating. So, this is my full setup, and it is second to last on the floor. This arrangement took some time, but it's a lot better now that I've had expertise in producing alclad aluminium sheets, which this setup also requires. Now using the radio control unit I am producing and the cooling systems which I showed you now, I am planning to make supercomputers using OC supercomputer recipe. As you can see, this recipe requires 9 radio control unit and 9 cooling system to make 3 supercomputer. Since I am making 30 each, 30 divided by 9 is 3.33. But I am building only 3 assemblers, so 27 of each will be used and saving the remaining 3 in my storage. I also completed the supercomputer setup today and saved it because I am currently storing the cooling systems in my storage. It will be some time before I begin powering on this supercomputer setup. These 3 assemblers are my supercomputer setup making 9 supercomputers per minute. I have already brought in the resource by smart splitting it before sending the resources needed to my storage, so that if needed, I can immediately start producing them. I will probably send the supercomputer output and merge them with cooling systems and send it to storage where it will be split and sent to storage using a smart splitter. I moved to a higher location to show you guys my entire floor if possible. The empty space behind the cooling system setup is where I intend to build a fused modular frame setup. I already have a setup in mind, and I plan to produce 10 per minute in the end. I'm not sure if that's enough, but I think it's enough to store and utilize for future building projects. My last project in this floor will be turbo motors, but I don't think I have enough space to fit that here. Maybe I will extend here, or extend it on the floor below. So here are all of my setups on this floor that I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed it. It may not be large or massive, but I believe it is adequate on this floor. Instead of going vertical, I went horizontal. So, if you liked this video, consider leaving a like, and subscribing for more content like this in future. I am planning to move to a new base and have already done half of it. You can check that video in the link on my right side of the screen. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye.